Welcome to the Infinite Surface podcast. Today we have Leah Artwick and Molly Walsh. Molly and Leah are both great artists, but I wanted to talk with them together because of the great friendship they have. Leah and Molly met when they went through and graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design's illustration department. Incidentally, it's where I met them both as well when I taught there for a time in that same department. Since their graduation, we've kept in touch, and I've seen their relationship, which is genuinely inspiring, last through the varying transitions of their careers, as they both seem to effortlessly, humorously, and generously support each other. They both have carved out admirable and interesting careers for themselves, from opposite ends of the country. Molly lives in the East Coast, and she's an illustrator and a surface designer. And Leah lives on the West Coast. She's an illustrator, storyboard artist, animator, and director. Today we'll discuss their time at RISD, how they manage the famous RISD workload, and how they see their education all these years later. We'll discuss how they had to adjust that work ethic to manage a healthy work-life balance in their adult lives, and we'll just generally catch up and see what they've been up to lately. So without further ado, Molly Walsh and Leah Artwick. So, we're here, episode 3 of Infinite Surface. Welcome, Molly and Leah. Molly was my TA a long time ago at Rhode Island School of Design, pre-college program, and later introduced me to Leah. We studied together for a very short time. I was teaching at the illustration program at the time, and both of you went through that illustration program, right? Both of you were in RISD's illustration, right?
Yes. Yep.
So why don't we just start by catching up with what y'all are up to, because you're well out of school now, of course, and you're well into your professional careers. What was the year that you graduated? You said 2013?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So 8 years later. Why don't we start, Leah? Why don't we start with you and just see what you're up to recently?
Yeah, so as of right now, I am currently directing at DreamWorks Television on the Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous series. I've been doing that for about a year and some change now.
Yeah.
So I kind of climbed up my way through there and got promoted on this show, and that's about it, because everything outside of that is just like, I'm sitting at home in quarantine.
Yeah, everybody's kind of stuck. So when you say you climbed up through the rank there, does that mean where did you start on that? Did you start storyboarding or?
Yeah, so I originally moved out to LA to be an animator at Titmouse. So I animated on some shows there, and then I was hired as a storyboard revisionist at DreamWorks. So essentially that's like after the boards are done, the directors give notes. And by that time, the board artists are already on another episode. So that's where the revisionists come in. So we address any, if there needs to be reboarding or restaging or acting choices that need to be different due to the dialogue. That's what our job is. And it's considered like the entry level position for board artists. And then I was promoted to board artist after that on Guillermo del Toro's Tales of Arcadia trilogy. I was a board artist on Wizards. And then I moved over to Jurassic as a board artist for about 6 months maybe. And then my director got promoted to supervising director, and he put my name in for the director position. And that's where I am now.
Yeah. And why don't you tell us a little bit about, like you said, you moved out to be an animator. So did you study that specifically in school? I mean, because I remember that you were doing quite a bit of illustration at the time,
Yes.
But then we studied stop motion animation together. And so was that like a specific goal of yours that you had from studying, or is that something you wanted to do anyway? And where did Titmouse fit into that?
Yeah, so I went to school because I wanted to get into animation, but I really wanted to do character design or like the biz dev side of it. And then Molly and I took intro to animation together, and that was kind of like how we really started to bond. And I found out like, I really like this, and I'm pretty
It's
good
where
at
we
it.
discovered Leah had a gift for this kind of thing, and I did not.
The paths diverge, right?
Yeah. The friendship was formed, but the paths diverged.
Right.
Yeah.
So who was that? Agnieszka Woznicka was your teacher?
Yes, that was Agnieszka.
Right. Yeah. I took that same class.
Oh, did you? Yeah,
Yeah,
she
yeah.
One of me and Molly's favorite things from that class was, I think it was your animation, Molly, where Agnieszka paused it and she was like, I like this part that looks like a butt.
I like where it looks like a butt.
That's super prophetic.
Yeah.
It's like, and this will be your career forever. After our audience gets to
that was
know
the
Molly
true
a little bit.
divergence.
Yeah, Leah makes beautiful animations and I make work that looks like a butt.
Well, that's only 70% true, Molly.
Yeah. They're very beautiful butts.
I've worked hard on them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I decided to like weasel my way into the degree project classes, like the junior animation degree project and the senior animation degree project with Amy.
Okay, that's Amy Krasner.
I think Kravitz.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Krasner is a fine artist, right? Yeah. Kravitz,
Okay.
right. Yeah, she's the animation. She was like the head of the animation department at the time, I believe, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And it was pretty interesting because it's, at least in my experience, like the animation department at RISD seems very geared towards independent animation and not so much, commercial Los Angeles entertainment industry animation. So, I would try to storyboard, and Amy, being the very sweet, wonderful person she is, would just be like, well, what does your heart tell you? Like, do that. So it wasn't actually like a lot of direct feedback on boarding or anything. Yeah. But
I take it your professional experience hasn't been as accommodating. People aren't saying, oh, Leah, just what does your heart tell you?
What does your heart say? Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
But yeah, I made a film and I applied for animation jobs, and I got hired at a Boston studio called Soup to Nuts on a preschool show called Word Girl.
Yeah.
As an animator, and unfortunately after a year there the studio was shut down. So my animation,
and what city did you say that was in? Soup to Nuts?
Boston.
In Boston.
Okay. Yeah, Waterton, so outside of Boston,
nearby.
Yeah. So my animation supervisor recommended me for a job at Titmouse because he knew some people there. So I took a test and I got the job, and it was just freelance for a little bit, but I figured like I wanted to move out to LA anyway. That's where all the other animation jobs seemed to be.
Yeah.
So I asked them if I could work in-house, and they said yes. And that's when I made the move out.
Yeah. What did that test look like? I think those of us that are outside the animation world don't know what that test looks like.
Yeah, that's a good point. So for Titmouse, the show I did, and a lot of their shows when I worked there, were animated in Flash, which now is Adobe Animate.
Right.
So they send you a file the file I was sent was essentially like, here are the boards, here's the background setup, and here are the character rigs. So essentially that means like it was puppet animation. So it was like a full character with joints and everything. And if you need to, you can redraw where necessary if the movement is really complex. But the show that I tested for, Moonbeam City, was mostly talking heads. It was a very like visually striking show. So a lot of it was pretty static. So yeah, they include the dialogue and the boards, and you essentially just have to animate what's happening. So just kind of line it up with the boards and make acting choices according to the dialogue. And you send it in, and you have like, it depends on the kind of test. I think I had a week to do it. So on top of like full-time work, sometimes that can be a little tricky, but it was a simple enough test where it wasn't too strenuous.
Yeah. Maybe they know that people that are applying for jobs might also have jobs. So
yeah, I mean, some studios are not that kind. Some tests are really hard, but that one was thankfully. Right? Yeah. There are a lot of tests that people are like, And I think it depends on how much people put into it, but some
Yeah.
tests are just like, yeah, I spent an additional like 20 or more hours on this in addition to my full-time
Right.
job. So
Right. Yeah.
they can get intensive.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting thing because I mean, we'll talk more about this later, but RISD has an entrance exam test like that.
Yeah.
And I've come across many in my teaching career, a lot of tests that are not as rigorous as the RISD test is. And it's such a controversial point, right? Because the question is, well, I mean, in your case, I'm coming from an educational perspective. In your case, it makes more sense, right? Because they're trying to cull the herd, right? They're trying to make sure that who gets in can do the things that, but in education, it's so different, and it's so controversial, these tests, because it really is a question of like, well, is it a good indicator as to like what kind of student this person will be, or what kind of, if they, like the famous RISD bike drawing, for instance, is that a good indicator as to whether that person will be a good furniture maker? Or a glass artist or something like that. So, I believe in them somewhat, but it's interesting to hear that other perspective, because I'm not super used to applying for jobs with tests, so.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, not every studio does it.
Yeah.
DreamWorks actually doesn't, which is, I think, is pretty nice.
Yeah.
And a lot of professional artists, their view on it is like the portfolio should speak for themselves.
Right. So you have
itself.
it or you don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Or some studios will do a paid test. So it's more like they give you freelance to see if you can do the job.
Right.
Because a lot of times too, for tests, and I think this translates to the entrance exam, is like, you don't actually know how long people spent on this. Like if it's yeah, if it's like, do this in 5 hours, a lot of people will spend like a full day on it. So they get something much more refined than they can actually do in that amount of time. So I'm definitely in that camp where I think, I think the work should be based on the portfolio, or if you're not sure, like, you should be paid for your time. Because a lot of those tests are pretty brutal. It's a kind of a difficult thing to quantify.
Yeah. So you mentioned, of course, now everybody is going to want to watch your student film now that you've mentioned it. So where is that to be found? Do you have a link for that? Because we're going to post it.
It's everything's on Vimeo.
Okay, great.
So if you just search my name, it'll come up.
Okay. I'm sure I've seen it, but I can't think of it right now, but I'm sure I've seen it.
Was it so good?
It's 2D, yeah?
Yeah. It was all hand-drawn animation.
Yeah.
Because when I was at RISD, for some reason, I was just like, I don't need to learn any, computer programs. I'm going to just do everything traditional.
It's for losers.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Which, like, now I can't remember the last time I traditionally drew anything.
Is that right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
Is there just no room for it, like in the pipeline, or what,
Yeah, I mean, I think everything's just so streamlined with digital. Like for storyboarding, we use a program that like goes through Photoshop, or their Storyboard Pro, which is specifically like optimizes an interface for storyboarders. So it's just a lot more convenient and less time intensive than doing traditional boards.
Yeah. And Molly, you're an analog holdout, are you not? I feel like you're still doing a lot of pencil and paper.
Yeah, in my personal work for sure, but for my day job, it's all digital.
Well, let's jump. I mean, we have a lot more to cover with Leah as well, but maybe we can jump over to that for a second, since you mentioned your day job. So you're working in something like surface design, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So I've been working in product development design in some capacity, basically since graduating.
Right.
I first was hired by a small gift company on Cape Cod, where they made like kind of like tchotchkes you'd find in a gift store. And it was, that job definitely had its pluses and minuses, but like I learned a lot, and I got a lot of experience in the time I was there.
Yeah. What were you doing for them specifically?
Oh, I designed everything.
Like from concept to like packaging, or
they did like mugs, pillows, bags, kitchen towels, aprons, just like so much stuff.
You know,
so
now
I
that you
definitely
say that, I wish all my kitchen towels and aprons were designed by you. I'm thinking that sounds great. Like, why did you ever leave that job? I want you back there now.
it had its downsides, but you know, definitely got a lot of experience in a short amount of time. And while I was there, you know, being a 20-something on Cape Cod, which is essentially like a retirement community in the off season, I had a lot of free time. So I got into editorial illustration and did that kind of on nights and weekends. And eventually I was working for clients like the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post. And I was doing that probably through like 2015. When I quit that job, moved back in with my parents, just like wanted nothing to do with Cape Cod. And then I was just trying to freelance full-time for a while. And then eventually I was hired by the TJX companies, which is like the parent company for Marshalls, Home Goods, TJ Maxx. And I do surface design for them for textiles.
Okay. Oh, so that's continuous, right? You're still,
that's my job.
Still in,
yep.
Okay. Yeah. And is that like a full-time thing, like a 8-hour a day kind of thing?
It is.
So, so the freelance and independent work that you do is all outside those hours.
It is. Yeah.
That's
I haven't been doing as much freelance lately. The last big project I did was a children's book in I was working on that in 2018. It was published in 2019.
So tell us a little bit about that. What is that?
So it's a book about the theory of relativity, but like in terms that a 5 to 8-year-old could understand.
That's perfect for me.
Yeah, me too. When I was first presented with the idea, I was like, actually, like, what is that?
You're like, do you already have one that's for like, let's say 3 to 4-year-olds that could like clear this up for me?
You need to do some research. But that came about. I was approached by an agent who I'm still with in probably 2017. And she brought me this project.
Oh, excellent. And is any of this like surprising for you as you move through your career? You know, it's funny in some ways. I rarely, I guess, see your product design work. What I see is this fairly steady flow of like independent, almost like fine art on the edge of illustration, these kind of like letter alphabets that you're illustrating, or, you know, or the yoga poses, or you know, or like when you put up your children's book stuff or something like that. So that's what I see, and so I think you're just like steadily churning this stuff out. But so are things like, you know, like the package design or the product design, is that something that was kind of a surprise to you to find your way into that?
Definitely. I think that was a job that I kind of fell into, and it's just kind of been like one thing leading to another with it.
Right.
And it's weird with my day job. I'm like very behind the scenes. Like nothing has my name on it. Like nothing really has my fingerprint on it.
Right.
It's like design work.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. And so it has a different dimension to it entirely than the kind of fine arts work that you're doing.
Definitely. I think they kind of inform each other though. Like Leah was saying, before graduating from RISD, like I did not know how to use a computer.
Yeah.
And my first week on my first job out of school, my boss was traveling, and I just spent the whole week struggling in Illustrator, which I'd never used before, trying to make this like ugly mermaid ornament. And I spent the entire week on that, and it was just like trial by fire. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was like, why did I not learn any of this in school?
I'm having trouble. I'm the kind of guy who did learn computers in school to get by, and then just very quickly stopped using them almost entirely. So something like Illustrator, like I used to know how to use Illustrator. I used to use it quite often. And then just all of a sudden, like 12 years went by and like I just haven't touched the thing, you know? And so I'm like, you know, like at this point, I just really don't. And so I'm in the very fortunate situation to be surrounded by just super literate computer users like in my students. So you know, I'm very often in the quite humbling position of just being you know, educated by my students constantly in this arena, you know. And luckily they find me useful for something. I haven't quite figured out what yet, but so Leah, maybe I can ask you as well, like in terms of directing, I mean, that seems like a big shift from like storyboarding or animating. I'm imagining you're not drawing as much as you were, and I think that's a great passion of yours, is like, you know, drawing and painting and illustrating. So why don't you tell us a little bit about like what that shift was like, or what you find yourself doing daily now that you weren't before? And maybe the same question, which is like, is it kind of a surprise to you to find yourself, you know, I don't know if behind the camera is the right term, but you know, off the storyboards anyway?
So yeah, it definitely was. I think the biggest change for me is was just having to put my hands in like a lot more pots than I had before. Like I'm pretty introverted, and like my mentality at work was like, okay, I'm here to work. Like I gotta get stuff done. So that oftentimes on some previous shows led to me not really connecting with a lot of my fellow coworkers, who were all like so wonderful and really nice. And I made friends with some of them, but a lot of times it was just like, all right, I'm here to work. Like I'm not going to go talk to other people. I'm just going to do my job. And for directing, like you absolutely can't do that. Like I constantly have to be communicating with my board artists, with my revisionists, with my supervisors, you know, with the writers, with the layout artists, just to make sure everything is working like it should be. Because I'm on a 3D show, so that often means asking questions like, oh, can this prop do this? Like it's written in the script like this, but it can't. So what's the solution we can come up with to have that same feeling, but that fits within our you know, technological constraints that we have.
And when you say that, you mean like maybe the way in which it was constructed digitally doesn't allow it to be animated in a way that the script is asking for?
Yes, like exactly. That? So for example, if you have like a fuse box and, you know, a character needs to cut a wire or something, it could be something along the lines of like, oh, well, the actual inside of the fuse box isn't built, so you can only shoot it from behind and have the door open. So something like that. Or
it's another, you know, 2 days work to build out that.
Exactly. So it's just coming up with creative solutions. And like, you know, sometimes in Jurassic we have some explosions, but that costs more, so you can only do it a certain amount of times, or you can only shoot it from certain angles.
Can I ask you, you know, I think there's an interesting conversation here. I'm interested in it because I'm like, in my art practice, I'm the opposite of a pragmatist, you know, like no decision is ever made by like, you know, time constraint or anything. So I spend absurd amounts of time with my projects, and too much, and I wish I didn't. But, you know, coming from RISD, I'm wondering what the mentality shift was for you, because the you know, swimming in the RISD soup, you know, there's all of this like competition over who's working harder and who's, you know, who's staying up later and all this kind of stuff. And so I'm wondering if in your mind, you know, when you're having conversations about the inside of fuse box, you know, that RISD brain is just kind of like, hey, I don't know, just stay up all night and make the fuse box, you know, and like you know, that kind of no compromise for aesthetics mentality that I feel like, I mean, I was in the graduate program. I don't know what the undergrad program was, but that was kind of the vibe there, and I valued that, and I do value that, but it's like totally impossible in a pipeline situation. So is that, I don't know, how do you feel about that, or does that matter to you at all? Was that how you felt at RISD, or?
I definitely fell into that camp at RISD of like, I need to stay up all night. I like, if I'm not pulling an all-nighter, am I even working hard enough?
Right,
which,
totally
like looking
bad way to live.
Horrible way to live. Like I remember for my senior animation degree project, like I stayed up for 5 days, which is like, people can die from that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're like your body's still recovering from that.
And you passed out, didn't you?
Yeah, I passed out
Get out of here.
Yeah, in one of my liberal arts classes. I say thankfully, like I've passed out before from getting my blood drawn, so I knew it was coming. So it wasn't just like I fell on the floor. But I had to stop mid presentation in my liberal arts class to be like, I'm really sorry, I'm gonna pass out. Like I need to go to health services. So upon leaving RISD for like a few years, I was working like 2 or 3 jobs at a time, where I had my full-time animation job, and I would do animation freelance and some illustration freelance, and I would still pull a bunch of all-nighters, and was living like a pretty unhealthy lifestyle. And I can't tell you when the switch happened, but at a certain point I decided like, this isn't worth it. Like my health is more important, and my outside relationships are more important. Like it was actually probably around like I had a pretty bad breakup and felt like very alone in LA, because all of my friends were also his friends, and I didn't really see them anymore. And I think at that point I was like, I have to have some sort of network. Like I have to have support, and I have to build out these relationships for myself so that I can have a family out, or just a friend family out here, and just be happy and live a better lifestyle. And working all-nighters didn't fit into that. And it's become very important to me to like preach that kind of work-life balance to all the people that I work with, especially my supervising director. He made it a very big point to take care of us, to make sure that we didn't feel overwhelmed, or that we weren't being pushed too hard, that the notes we were getting weren't going to, have us stay late. So we got to leave on time, like every night. And I kind of adopted that as well, where I preach to my board artists like, hey, this is, at the end of the day, I love my job. I love animation. It is a huge passion of mine. But at the end of the day, like, this is a cartoon about dinosaurs, and your health is more important. So, I always, if any of my board artists had a problem, I was just like, you know what, it's okay. Like, take care of it. We have, revisionists, we have me to help. So actually, like, I do draw, quite a lot. And I think it differs production to production, but oftentimes like the notes we get are pretty big, especially because we're on a big property like Jurassic. Like they want to make sure that all the exec notes really get addressed. So oftentimes I do big swaths of reboarding, just to address those notes that we could not have possibly seen coming.
Is it always the case that a director would be as facile as you are with like storyboarding? I mean, your ability to like jump in and it seems like a coach jumping in and playing the game, So, is that the case normally, that the person would have those skill sets and understand them, or just sometimes?
Yeah, I think in animation in particular, like a lot of directors come up through, the pipeline through storyboarding. So they know all that before, because oftentimes like you really need an understanding of that visual language to communicate what you want, and to be able to direct other people who are performing this visual task. Like I've worked with directors who did not come up through that the artistic side, and came up with the production side. And it's a very different method of communicating, but I find it much easier to have someone who can say like, this specifically isn't working, like referencing composition or timing or acting, as opposed to someone who kind of just gives notes that are like, oh, it's not quite there yet. I don't know how it's going to get there, but you'll figure it out.
Sounds like art school.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty common. At least most of the
Yeah.
directors I've worked with so far have had the, boarding history behind them.
Yeah. Actually, Molly, maybe we can ask you, because animation, of course, is famous for just being like a work overload, right? That, so if you're doing, if you're in school, I mean, I want to get back a little bit to this point about. I mean, I feel like we're going to need 3 more episodes of this to really dig through your, both of your personal histories. But I feel like this is such an important part, and I've seen RISD start to address this a little bit. And I know another student named Megan Jerbick, who was a few years your junior, and actually also was my TA, like Molly was, in the pre-college program, and is a fabulous artist and a fabulous person. And she was speaking up quite a bit about that, because I think the RISD energy drain took quite a toll.
Definitely.
And so, it's easy to see that on the animation side, because, as you say, Leah, one note on a storyboard could mean that you have to make 30 new drawings just like that, right?
Yeah.
So, or more sometimes, right? So
usually a lot more.
Usually. Sorry, I'm downplaying animation. Or I mean, or the worst case scenario is you've already animated it, now you're looking at reanimating it, right? So, so Molly, how did that show up on the sort of illustration side? Because while Molly, you did some animation, that wasn't entirely your focus, is that right?
Oh, it wasn't my focus at all.
Which was butts. Your focus was butts.
My focus was butts, and that's what I've made a career out of. I mean, I remember at RISD thinking that if I got 4 hours of sleep in a night, that was a pretty good night.
Yeah.
And there was just this culture of like staying up because everyone was staying up. Like we had our studios in the illustration building, and we'd have at least one extra meal every day, because we were just staying up so late that like your body needs a meal at like midnight.
Right. Yeah.
So Leah and I had a lot of Dominoes delivered to the studio.
Yeah,
that's true. Late night meals are like by definition unhealthy meals, right?
Absolutely.
Nobody's eating like plain yogurt
No.
and a kombucha.
You need like that good bad food to just leap into.
You need to fill yourself with Domino's lava cakes.
Seasoned with tears. So where do you think that came from, Molly? Like, do you think that was teacher driven, student driven, if it was just an ongoing cultural competition thing, or what do you think that is?
I think definitely freshman year, like when everyone was living in the dorms, and you really treat your section, as they call it at RISD, which is like the same group of students who you have your 3 core studio classes with. Like you treat them as your family.
Right.
And when everyone is staying up late, everyone's showing up at crit in the morning, just like not having slept, not having showered, like you think that's normal. And then as you go through RISD, I think some people figured out like a better work-life balance, but at least in our group of friends, like it was standard to stay up until like 3 every night.
And is it just the workload? Is it just that every class is asking you to do, 15 hours worth of work in a week, and there's just not?
There was definitely like, it was the workload, but I think it was also just the expectations we set for ourselves. I feel like by the end of RISD, like it's really not the teachers who are pushing you to stay up to that point. But that was definitely hard to unlearn after RISD. Like, going from art school, which is really like a 24-hour-a-day experience, to like a 9-to-5 job was definitely an adjustment.
It's interesting too, because the two of you are at least from I know no art gets made without significant suffering usually. But the two of you are so facile in your making, And I think for a student, I mean, if it's fair enough to say, if you can agree that you've like achieved some kind of aesthetic, peak or plateau or whatever you want to call it, where you make art that is acceptable to your eye,
Yeah.
and that you can be proud of. And students don't always have that advantage, right? Like they don't always have that sense of like, all right, I'm at least like where, or in the realm of where I want to be, even if we're all still, learning. So I think that what the teachers I found do is they have uncompromising expectations, right? And so like the critiques are, and I think I'm kind of guilty of this too, is that my critiquing is like it's not unforgiving, because it's very forgiving, but it holds an expectation of professionalism, even if you're not dealing with professionals. And it has conversations that immediately relate the work that you're making as a first year student to the greatest art that's ever been made in the history of the world.
I mean, I definitely, when I TA'd for you for pre-college, I definitely found myself like thinking like, how do I critique these high schoolers?
Right.
Like giving them credit for what they're aiming for, but also like keeping in mind that they're in high school.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how did you solve that? Tell me, Molly, what was your secret?
I think
let me just say real quick, like, Molly was, in my estimation, like pretty much the perfect TA, and would be the perfect teacher, and the reason was because you very effortlessly, I think, presented yourself as an example, like a kind and approachable example for the students, about how to conduct yourself kind of professionally, even if you were, I think at the time you were just a second year student or something like that. Like, I think you were just a sophomore at RISD.
Yeah, going into junior year.
Yeah, so I really saw what I saw was that the students, they might have looked to me for like the final word, or like, some kind of official guidance, but it was you that they wanted to be, right? Like they wanted to go to RISD, so they wanted to fill your spot in a way. So that's kind of a lot of responsibility, and the grace and the sort of empathy that you carried that with, I thought was pretty profound, actually. And I felt like those were by far the easiest teaching experiences I've ever had, because of the way in which I think you managed expectations for them. You and Ben both did that so effortlessly, where the expectations that you presented them were of a standard that was like totally acceptable, but of an empathy that was, I don't know if forgiving is the right word, but let's say understanding, or because I don't think there's a conversation in education about meeting students at their level. Say like, okay, meet them at their level. Don't, and I don't know that that's a perfect concept, right? Because if you constantly are meeting someone at their level, how do you indicate the level above? So I'm not sure that that's a perfect concept, but I think it's a concept to be managed in combination with let's say like higher expectations. So what did you find in that experience, or do you? It's so long ago now, right? So that's like already 10 years ago, right?
Well, there's that Ira Glass quote that I think about a lot. Ira Glass from This American Life. I remember finding it like on Tumblr when I was in college, and it's something about how when you're starting off in like whatever craft you're doing, you have taste, and like your taste is what gets you into it, and you're making bad work, but it's bad because you have good taste.
Right.
And I think that was like the thing I struggled with all throughout school. And like, even when I'm struggling now in my work, it's like, because my expectation and like, what I like to look at is so much better than what I'm putting out.
Right.
And I think it was just like, when critiquing those students, it was like trying to figure out like what they were aiming for, and then like giving them like concrete things that they could work on to get there.
Yeah.
Because they're all going in with different goals, and like some of them are just like trying to figure it out and like trying to like guide them towards like what they're actually going for, or like how could this be better in your own way, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like I find as a teacher as well, especially in a situation like that, it's a little bit different when you're at the college level, because you can assume a commitment. You can assume that this person is committed in one way to a creative lifestyle. And so the reality that you can present for them, that, because what you have to do in college, I think, is you have to sort of create a scenario that is indicative of the reality beyond the university setting. And in pre-college, you don't have that, right? Because you have students that are figuring out whether they're going to commit to this, and some have already clearly, and some clearly have committed elsewhere and are just like spending their summer this way, and some are like on the edge. And it's an interesting question for me always, to think, well, what kind of reality should I present to this person? Should I show them that it's hard? Should I show them that it's kind? Because it's not kind. It's not, it's not been super kind to me. I think both of you could probably attest that you've hit some bumps in the road, right? So, if feelings get hurt, and there, I think that there's a lot of teachers kind of historically at RISD that maybe take a little bit too much delight in presenting that kind of like hurt feelings reality. And so the critiques can be like smashingly tough sometimes, and that's not a critique style. I don't know if that's right or wrong. I don't know if it's positive or negative. Did you have teachers like that? Do you remember anything like that?
Yeah.
You do. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember like, I think overall I had like a pretty positive experience at RISD. But I remember particularly freshman year, being pretty gutted that illustrative was so often used as such a negative critique.
Really?
As like, especially having students in the class who they want to do that and they want
illustrators.
to pursue that. So I oftentimes got very harsh critiques that were like, this is too illustrative, and they would expound upon there. And of course there were a lot of technical things wrong with my freshman level work, but to immediately come into an environment where the thing you want to do is perceived to be lesser than, like very, very bluntly, like, this is a lesser form of art, and that's why we are using this critique on you. It was pretty heart-wrenching. And I often found myself in those classes, instead of exploring things in a way that I wanted to, or that I found satisfying or productive, I would just kind of default to like, okay, I know what the teacher wants, so I'm just going to do that. And I made work that I would never make, that I would never explore, because I felt so defeated that like they immediately didn't see my work as up to snuff. They immediately didn't see my work as worthy in a sense. So I would often just make like, I would kind of bullshit my way through assignments where it's like, okay, they want me to do this. I'll do this, and I'll never do anything like it again, but I just need to like please them.
Oh my God.
And Molly, I know, has similar experiences.
Like trying to please teachers was like, that was my thing freshman year. Like I was like, I felt so out of place when I first got to school. Like I never took any art classes outside of my public high school before going to RISD. And like my first day I show up to this figure drawing class. I'd never had a nude model before. I was like, what the heck is going on? Like everyone looks like they know how to draw a naked person but me. And so like my thing was like, how do I do the kind of art that people like here?
Yeah.
And that definitely took a while to unlearn.
Yeah. I also
that's
remember
oh, sorry, go ahead, Leah.
Oh yeah, this will be really quick. I remember Molly and I were in for our first section together, and I remember our first drawing class. The first half of it was like we were on the floor in blindfolds, like drawing with charcoal.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I remember our professor, like I heard him standing over me a bunch, and he, after we took our blindfolds off on our break, he was like, "Your line work is so beautiful, it's wonderful." And then we started figure drawing, and he came up to my easel and was like, "Wow, you draw better blindfolded, huh?" And it was like so horrible.
Oh my God. That's so brutal.
Because that was our very first class too.
Right,
so
right.
I very much had the mentality Molly was saying, where it's like, what do I do here? Like, what's going on?
Meanwhile, I'm probably like sitting next to you like, they didn't say my blindfold drawing was good either. It's all bad.
You just have to draw with your feet, Molly. That's the answer. Yeah. I mean, that's really interesting. I think, you know, I mean, this will get into like a really brief synopsis of my personal history, but, you know, I decided at about 10 that adults were super silly. And I just became certain, not certain of that, but I figured out that advice was to be negotiated, you know, and it had something to do,
to learn early.
I mean, it was, listen, it doesn't come without its problems, right? Because it means that you don't necessarily listen to anybody ever, right? So, I mean, not that I don't take things, I always consider everything, but, or I like to think I do anyway. But, you know, sometimes you just have to follow rules in a way. And I was never good at that, right? Because I kind of figured out, well, look, I just, you know, even as a 10-year-old, I was like, well, I need to figure out how this makes sense in my reality. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't, then I'll not forget it, but I'll hold on to it, but I won't necessarily enact it. So when I always kind of describe it as if like my ego or my self-esteem is like a pole, and you know, people are constantly throwing balls at that pole, and it's causing it to pulse back and forth. And so, you know, like this blindfold drawing obviously isn't what you wanted to do. So it pulsed you sort of outside of that like central ego that you had, or that central sense of yourself. And that's something that I've always felt kind of, you know, blessed with in a way, is like a strong pull, you know. And so when teachers come, like I've been to residencies before where it's like a bunch of adults, and, you know, anywhere from 60 to, you know, to 25 or so. Mm-hmm. And they'll have a visiting artist come through, and some visiting artists are, let's say, they tread more carefully than others, and some of them really bring in their perspective like hardcore, and they'll just treat, you know, there's a lot of ego there where people are like, hey man, I'm not your student, like you're critiquing me at a residency, this is like voluntary, I don't want to hear this like kind of really strong sense of what you think is wrong with my art, you know. And some people, some visiting artists really go at it like that. And I saw it particularly in this one case. There was about 7 people at an artist residency, and these dudes came in my studio, and, you know, I have to say it was easier for me because the kind of representational work that I made was like resonating with them. So while they said like a bunch of super dumb stuff and like really offensive stuff throughout the meeting, it was all generally like they were encouraging and accepting of me as like legitimate, you know, whereas I think for other people that were working in other methodologies or other styles, they brought like a let's say a more robust skepticism, and the community was scandalized, you know, and the adults, you know, they got shook, you know, like they were really upset for a couple days, I think, and some of them complained, which I think was maybe fair enough, you know. I mean, if you're critiquing like that, you should get some feedback, right? So, you know, it's an interesting thing. I'm always thinking about this constantly because I'm in the position of constantly giving feedback, right? That's like my whole job is to do so. And I guess in a way, Leah, that's your job as well. And then
Yeah.
I guess in a way, Molly, your job is receiving feedback more than it's getting or giving feedback. Do you find yourself giving feedback? Are you in a kind of managerial role like that, or not really?
I've started working with more freelancers lately, so
Oh,
I've
okay.
I've been
Yeah.
finding myself having to give more feedback, and
Yeah.
it is hard to sometimes toe the line between like, how do I not hurt your feelings while also like being honest with
Right.
what I need from you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and then I also struggle with like, I could just do this myself.
Yeah. By the time I explain it to you, I can just knock this out
Yeah,
real
that's like, yeah,
quick.
that's something I'm trying to let go of, is like, how do I
Yeah.
give like pointed critique that is going to get you to do what I need?
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you, this is a question for both of you. I've heard echoed consistently, and I have to say, maybe this is just anecdotal, but I have to say that I hear this sentiment echoed more from women than I do from men. And I guess I'm not surprised by that, but, and I heard, you know, well, I hear it sometimes when I'm talking about teaching, and I see these incredibly capable and articulate and compassionate people, like the two people I'm talking about, I'm looking at right now, and sometimes thinking like, well, I can't teach, or that's not my thing, or like I can never get up in front of a group of people and talk. And I hear that. I'm not saying that you feel this way, but I'm saying I hear that a lot from especially younger people that have just graduated, and you think like you can totally teach, like you can totally do this. So was there a growth for you? I mean, sorry to make assumptions based on gender, but I'm just asking, like, what was there a growth for you in terms of being able to give feedback, or being able just to have the confidence to stand up in front of someone and say like, look, this is the thing?
I think for me, it happened when we started illustration.
Hmm.
So for people who didn't go to RISD, it's like first year is your foundational year, where you're
Right.
drawing 2D design and 3D. Then sophomore year is when you start your actual like discipline or major that you want to go into. So being with professors and being with other more like-minded people, I think really helped. Because going into illustration, it was what I wanted to do, where I wanted to be. And I think the professors that I had in particular approached students with kind of a more like compromise mindset, where it was like, okay, we can see kind of stylistically what you like to do, and we're going to challenge your thinking within the realm of how you enjoy making art. So I think just being in that setting where, as opposed to freshman year, where a lot of it was like your work is too illustrative and that's a bad thing. This was like, your work is illustrative and that's great. Let's make it better.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So I think just being in that, for me, a more positive space, allowed me to be more confident in my work. And also like, I very quickly realized like, okay, this critique is to help us get better. And that's what we're here for. And especially I was lucky to have pretty nice teachers. So in the actual illustration department, I never really got like torn apart or anything. But ever since then, I was like, I feel very confident giving critique. I really enjoy it. I really like, discussing with other like-minded people, and also people who think really differently from me, because they can bring up a lot of things that I may never have thought about. So I always viewed critique as like a really positive experience, and I personally really liked it and responded well to it. So I didn't really have a problem with jumping in and giving my thoughts. And that I think that varied based on what class we were in, because like I don't feel super confident with colors. So in painting, I would give less critiques, as opposed to like, my illustration or animation classes, where I felt like I was stronger. I felt more confident giving my thoughts.
you don't feel confident with color? What?
I mean, I'm much better now, but
I was like,
RISD.
you're pretty good with that.
Thank you.
What are you
Just, I mean,
talking
that's my
about?
opinion.
Thank you.
Like,
Well,
I don't
at
feel
RISD
confident with color. Like, you should be confident with
Well,
color.
that's nice to hear. At RISD, I definitely was like
Okay.
pretty bad, and I'm okay with accepting that.
Fair enough. And what about for you, Molly? Yeah.
I think the skill of being able to critique was like definitely something I developed at RISD. And you know, by the end of senior year, like I had no problem giving critique. Like I was going to say I had no problem receiving critique, but I did cry once during a senior year, so I can't fully say that.
Yeah.
But you know, that definitely did help, like once I started working, because I remember my first year working, someone came to me with a critique of whatever I was working on, and they started it with "no offense," and I was like, "Oh, I went to RISD. I'm not taking offense to this."
Yeah.
And then it was interesting. Like I kind of did spend a couple of years mostly being on the receiving end of critique.
Yeah.
And now I'm kind of back in the position where I'm giving that, and I'm like trying to find my sea legs again a little bit.
Yeah. Sea legs.
And it's interesting because the way I give critique now in my job is so different than RISD. Like the parameters and like what I'm looking for are just so wildly different. Like, you know, the art I do for work is so commercial.
Right.
And like there is kind of a right and a wrong answer, whereas at RISD things were a lot more ambiguous, and it was more to do with like what you were going for. Like, how do I help you do your best work? And now I'm like, it's like, how do you do the best work for me?
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah. How do I
help you do good work for me?
Yeah. Wow. It sounds, I mean, that almost sounds like a guru, like a title of a guru's book, right? I mean, that's like, in a way, there's a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm not sure how that book would go over now, but it's written by Carnegie, kind of reflecting back on how he saw his very wealthy father and his very wealthy family interact with like very, very powerful and important people. And there's some interesting stories in there, which I find, I haven't read it in a long time, so I don't know how it translates into the 2021 era. But I find them like kind of humble enough to be like agreeable. And one of the stories I like the most is a story about Teddy Roosevelt having like some kind of big fight with a senator or something like that. I'll get all the details wrong right now. But it was like total stalemate conversation and like, cursing and screaming kind of situation, like, forget it, we're just enemies. And so Teddy Roosevelt invited him over to the White House. And he said, well, let's talk about this issue alone at the White House. And so he invites him over. And the guy comes over, the senator comes over, and he's in the driveway, and he said, and Teddy Roosevelt says, "How was your weekend?" And he says, "Good." And Teddy Roosevelt says, "Well, I've been wanting to ask you about, I heard that you're interested in boats, and I'm thinking of, buying one or something like that. Can you give me some advice?" And so they start talking about boats, and like, 40 minutes goes by, 15, and then suddenly they're out of time. And Teddy Roosevelt says, "Oh my God, I can't believe we spent all our time talking about boats. We were supposed to talk about, whatever the issue was at hand." And so the guy says, "Well, you know what? No problem. I'll just come back next week." And, Teddy Roosevelt, they shake hands, they walk away, and Teddy Roosevelt was walking back with his assistant or whatever, and the assistant said, "Oh, I didn't know that you were interested in boats." And Teddy Roosevelt said, "I'm not." And that was an interesting one for me to think of, like the most powerful man in the world at the time giving over his time and energy and like the platform of voice just to another person, just to let them, verbalize their interests in an effort just to build a bridge, right? Like after one has been burned. And that book is kind of filled with that, and it's kind of echoing in a way what you're saying, Molly, which is like, how do you, it sounds quite manipulative, but it's like, how do you get people to function within the expectations that you have, and how do you yourself make expectations that are reasonable to expect about the people around you? It's not easy. So are there any like lessons that you guys feel, I like this because I feel like I've learned many lessons like after school that come from school, and most of them have to do with something tough, like some kind of tough feedback that I got. But I'm wondering if either of you feel like, 5 years later, you finally understood something, or 10 years later, you finally understood something that happened in school.
Oh, that's a good question. I think just bouncing off what we had just been talking about, like, I feel like knowing how to give and take critique has been pretty invaluable.
Right.
Especially, I think in any job it's useful, but especially in like animation, where your work often gets like redone, you're getting feedback pretty constantly, based on, script changes, exec notes. So I think just that in general has been pretty valuable.
Yeah.
I think also when people talked about like how valuable your connections at RISD are, I think going into school, I thought that always meant like RISD's going to set you up with a great job, and that's going to be amazing. And that's, not what happened for me, but like, the friends I made there and the teachers who I've gone back to with like professional questions, just questions about my work has been so helpful. Like I've contacted my old teachers multiple times since graduating with just like advice. They've been through it, or maybe someone in your graduating year has been through a situation that could help you out. And I've reached out to people I wasn't even that close with, just because we have that connection, and we went through this crazy thing together, and that's been really helpful.
It does. It somehow it does give the impression that like what's the Yale University, like Skull and Bones or whatever, the kind of like mythical, what is it called, the Illuminati or something like that, right? Like so you get this sense that when you go to RISD, there's this mythos around it that like you say, Molly, like as if you're going to walk out of that school and there's going to be a limousine waiting for you, going like, welcome to the real world. We're going to bring you to your palace now, and that's not how that works, right? Like that's not what the connections do. It's not what the connections are for. And I found that as well, like, the connections that I made didn't serve me opportunities. They didn't, because all the connections that I had, it's interesting, like in the illustration or animation world, because in some real way, once you graduate, you're now competing with your teachers for the same job. So they could, maybe they can help you get a job here or there, but realistically, they're not the job givers, right? They're also job takers. So, and what I think is interesting about that kind of fraternity, or I hate those words, like, but the kind of camaraderie that you have coming out of RISD is that there's a kinship. Maybe that's a better word.
That's a good term for it.
And you can rely on a certain amount of like sympathy and empathy, and maybe a certain amount of advice that comes from that, that really can serve, that, or just, maybe this is another good question, like, can you guys talk a little bit about what it was like to, maybe this sounds a little corny, but just to have each other, because I think that, through all the ups and downs of whatever, and moving here and switching this and that, like it sounds like you guys have kind of consistently been very close for a long time.
Yes.
And how is that? How is that different now? Or maybe, I don't know. Maybe you can just talk me through a couple anecdotes about that. But I'm how did that work in school? How did that help you in school? How did that help you in that middle period, like before you found some professional ground? And then how does that help you now as professionals?
Are you talking specifically about like me and Molly's relationship?
Yeah. Just having a friend that is in the, at least proximally in the art world, and can listen with great sympathy and empathy.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, just on a baseline, like being at RISD together, in the trenches, like we know very intimately what we went through there. And yeah, like Molly is
staying up all night with someone, trying to finish a 5-second animation that'll really bring you close to someone.
Yes, truly. But yeah, like Molly is my absolute best friend. Like I tell her all the time, she's my rock, like life, my life, all that stuff.
We're very mushy.
We're very mushy.
I have noticed that.
But yeah, I mean, it's been like, she's been with me through my hardest times. Even when we've only lived in the same area once since graduating, which sucks. But she's usually the first person I call when there's bad news, when there's good news, like because of the relationship we formed at RISD, like I'm extremely comfortable telling her anything, and she understands me very deeply. So, when I'm upset, she knows what to say to make me feel better. When I'm, being too hard on myself, she can call me out on that. And even, I really appreciate our friendship on so many levels, but it's also like, if I'm misunderstanding something, or if I do something wrong or like hurt her in some way, she can very comfortably call me out on it. And like, we both know that we are not going to lose each other over those things. So instead of like arguments, we usually have like very calm discussions. So it's a relationship where I feel like very, very safe to be like honest, open, to make mistakes, to cry and be vulnerable. And that all started and was cemented very early on with our relationship at RISD, and knowing like what we went through together.
Yeah, it's very much like a family relationship at this point, which I think is just really special. I mean, I think a lot of people make that bond like with their romantic partners, but I think it's not every day that you find that in a friendship. And I think we kind of knew from the beginning like what a special bond we had.
It once we like actually connected, it feel like it just happened very quickly for us to become so close.
And then like Leah was saying, like definitely being at RISD and as unhealthy as it was, like staying up all night together, going through terrible critiques together, like, RISD was probably like, based on the amount of time we were awake, we're really in school for like 6 years, more than 4 years.
We spent a lot of time together.
We got a lot of bonus time, so.
I think RISD just heard that and just sent you a bill. Oh, is that the case? Here's some student loans.
You.
RISD, please.
Well, listen, it's not any two people that I would ask such a mushy question to, but I have to say that I've enjoyed seeing your individual lives and careers turn into something really wonderful. And I've always enjoyed how close and honest and encouraging you are of each other. And in both your cases, the effortlessness of your kindness, of your craft, in the integrity that you bring to both of those things, has always just tremendously impressed me. So you're welcome. I want to thank you for coming on and spending the time. And And it was a real joy to talk to both of you at the same time. It's been a long time.
Yeah, this was so nice.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
All right. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye.